Hello, Southwest Florida. This is Seku Radio. Seku Radio, Tampa, Sarasota, Clearwater, Bradenton. We're covering all. Today we have a great guest by the name of JIMO Serodio. JIMO is a great young entrepreneur. He won Entrepreneur of the Year with University of Tampa. JIMO's resume is pretty heavy. I'm going to ask JIMO to introduce himself. JIMO, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, Seku. Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation. So my name is JIMO. I was born and raised in Mozambique in southern Africa. I've now been in the United States for about 10 years. My whole life, I've been involved with plants, gardening, agriculture, but I took it more seriously as a career once I moved to U.S., to Tampa, Florida. I early got involved during college with a vertical farming company. I then did consulting, and that has since materialized into the startup I run today, which focuses on aquaponics as a new technique for agriculture, but perhaps more importantly, focuses on addressing, the big challenges that agriculture present, particularly as an environmental crisis and threat to natural ecosystems and to habitats. So my focus today is very much in addressing those with a particular interest in education, where I fundamentally believe there's a huge gap. And so I'm happy to chat about that a bit further today.
Great answer, JIMO. So we have, if you just joining us, Seku Radio, our guest is JIMO Serodio. We're talking about agriculture, solving food sustainability, food problems. JIMO, how you got interested in agriculture? Because when you went to University of Tampa, you went into engineering. How all of a sudden agriculture got involved in it?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I actually didn't go to University of Tampa for engineering. The university doesn't have an engineering department. I went to school for business, but even business or entrepreneurship, I consider some form of engineering, almost like business engineering. But the reason I got into agriculture was I think a lot about the future and about, these emerging problems and threats, such as the environmental crisis that we face. My upbringing in Mozambique and the greater Africa continent really connected me to the environment, to the outdoors, to ecosystems. And I could already start seeing some of that habitat loss and biodiversity loss happening in Africa. So over the years, over my lifetime, I've attributed more and more of that to agriculture. Agriculture is at the center of a lot of these problems. And that's how I've sort of transitioned my interest and respect for the environment into sort of the technological side of the solution. Ultimately, I had a conscious decision that the education came with the biggest priority in addressing this problem. Not so I myself or those I work with can address this problem, but so we at least equip the upcoming generation to face it.
Great answer. Agriculture is a big subject because the U.S., the country we're living in, got propelled into the world scene because of agriculture. So, JIMO, let's talk about vertical farming. For people who don't know, what is vertical farming?
Yeah, vertical farming is very hyped. It is basically the idea of farming volumetrically, stacking layers of farm or of agriculture, and it was coined in a book I read, The Vertical Farm, by Dickinson Pommier out of Columbia University, and I think it was instrumental in thinking of different ways of agriculture. Essentially, current agriculture is the most responsible use of resources, whether it's land, but also other resources such as water and fertilizer inputs, for example. So hydroponics specifically has been evolving, over the last few decades as a more controlled environment means to agriculture, meaning that the inputs can be better controlled. But then when combined with vertical, it simply means that one is yielding more output for a given area than a traditional open field plantation would. However, I would like to mention that vertical farming is by no means the solution to solving this problem. I think it is applicable in a few niche areas, mostly where crop shelf life is a problem, or potentially also for urban settings where there are wasted spaces that, if incorporated into vertical farming, then those spaces can be very well used to supplement the local food items. But again, I would like to say that there are huge environmental costs to vertical farms as well. The biggest one is the actual facility construction. It is quite carbon intensive if we practice current construction means. But then the second, which is not talked about as much, is again on the energy cost. Vertical farms inherently need artificial supplementation of light, and that comes with a huge carbon cost as well, not limited to the energy input, but the maintenance of these bulbs and these light fixtures. So I just wanted to mention that it is an area that attracted me very much into the space, but over the years I've come to realize that it by no means is the solution to produce the staple crops of today, the majority of the calories that feed a growing world population, such as corn, wheat, rice, to name a few.
Great. You discovered a fish tank called Malawi. That's when I met you. I was attending a conference in Tampa. Great innovation. How did you come up with the concept? Can you elaborate a little bit first on this concept of Malawi, and how did you come up with the idea?
Right. So, as I mentioned, I was very deep into the vertical farming scene, and I was starting to do some consulting as well for greenhouse settings and for just innovative methods of food production. And, the one that really struck me as very, very important to understand better, because it was still, very much emerging as it is today, was aquaponics. Aquaponics is, the combination of hydroponics, which mostly vertical farming is, along with aquaculture. And aquaculture is, the artificial means of housing and producing fish protein. Of course, that can apply into ornamental settings where you have aquaculture, but traditionally, that's a fish tank or an aquarium that we're aware of. However, when you combine a fish ecosystem with hydroponics, what happens is you create a synergy between multiple organisms, not limited to the fish and plants, but also to bacteria, where you have a metabolically active relationship between these in such a way that the inputs become greatly reduced. So I fell in love really with aquaponics, and in short, it saves a ton of water. It is quite efficient with the use of space, as it borrows a lot of hydroponic techniques. And I decided at the time that I wanted to showcase what aquaponics could really do. Malawi was my first product in aquaponics. It's a small-scale residential application of aquaponics. And I named it Malawi for a couple of reasons. One, because we have a lake in Africa called Malawi. It is in the country Malawi as well as in Mozambique, where I'm from. And it is one of many great ancient lakes of the Great Rift Valley of Africa, along with Lake Tanganyika and Lake Victoria and Lake Kivu. These are really cool lakes to me. They are interesting in how they've isolated fish species and how they retain certain properties unique to those lakes. But ultimately, it was a way of me to pay tribute and to these lakes that are otherwise unknown to the rest of the world, but important to me and to the people of Africa. And it happened also that fish, the cichlids, the African cichlids, are a very popular fish today in the pet industry for aquariums. So there's just a lot of overlap between this lake and what I was representing with aquaponics. And that's how I came up with the name Malawi for the first aquaponics system I created.
Do you have an idea how big is Lake Malawi?
I'm not entirely sure, but it is huge. So if you're on one side of Lake Malawi, you can't see the other side. It's basically a small sea. I would say that it's not the largest. Lake Victoria is the largest. But all of these lakes were formed around the same time, and they belong to this Great Rift Valley area of Africa, which is also known as the cradle of civilization. So, from an evolutionary biology perspective and anthropological perspective, it has been right there all along with the birth of our species.
Yes, I hear there's some serious crocodiles in Lake Malawi.
Well, that part of Africa has crocodiles, and crocodiles are pretty dangerous, yes. But we have also species of fish that are widely used today, such as the tilapia. There's the Mozambican version, and there's the Nile tilapia, and those are some of the most produced sources of protein today.
Great. Now, this is Seku Radio. Millions of people listening to us. Great guest, JIMO Serodio. JIMO, we're going to talk about aquaculture a little bit. And it's been said by certain people that aquaculture damages the environment. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, for sure. With aquaculture specifically, I would say that we are today sourcing more fish from aquaculture than from the wild. So that's an important trend to understand. What that means is because we can artificially, produce fish, we are alleviating the amount of fish that, are sourced from the natural carrying capacity of the planet. So from that perspective, aquaculture is quite beneficial and helpful. However, it's not perfect by itself because with recirculating aquaculture systems, there is still waste output. In order to maintain a non-toxic environment for fish, in particular, densely stocked fish tanks, there's still a lot of waste produced by this fish, and usually this waste is an output. It's a byproduct of these farms. And while those are packed with nutrients, if one introduces these nutrients into natural habitats and natural systems, it could work in a very similar way to the nutrient runoffs of agriculture, where you get algae blooms and you artificially unbalance the natural habitat. So by itself, aquaculture is not perfect. And that's why when paired with hydroponics, all of a sudden one can recycle these nutrients that are usually wasted and discharged and turn that into a fertilizer. And that's how aquaculture combines specifically with hydroponics as a means to not only producing the fish, but to having a source of fertilizer for the plants. Another thing is with aquaculture, in order to remove that toxicity, one needs to add a lot of water to the system, basically like a water